BBC 5 Live.
Policing the UK.
As part of 5 Live's month-long look at policing the UK, we want to focus on the impact that being a police officer can have on your mental health. How do you go about trying to look after yourself in a job that can expose you to so many difficult and traumatic experiences? Well, Keith Malda is PC and Police Federation rep in Brixton in South London. Now, in 2017, he was one of the first officers to arrive on the scene at the Westminster Bridge attacks. And then 2.5 months later, he was called to the Borough Market attacks. He was awarded a medal for bravery for his actions at both attacks. I'm going to talk to him in a moment and find out exactly what happened and the impact it has had on him too. I can also speak to recently retired Officer Paul Rowe, who was with Cambridgeshire Police until November last year. His trauma support dog, Holly, is also with him too. Paul, hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Yeah, good. Holly's she is listening in. She's curled up on her bed having a snooze, but she's listening.
Well, firstly, the most important thing is let's not disturb Holly. No one likes to be awoken from a peaceful nap, especially just to get on the radio. I'm glad she's happy. What's the relationship between you and Holly? A trauma support dog, how does that work?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I was a police officer at Cambridgeshire Police, and before then the British Transport Police. And about 6 years ago, I got diagnosed with PTSD through a lot of my service in the police, in particular the British Transport Police, where I attended 4 of the major train crashes. On the back of that, I got Holly as a puppy, as a family pet, before my diagnosis. But when I got injured and then got diagnosed with PTSD, she really changed. She looked after me. She really synced in with my emotions as well. So the opportunity came along for her to become a wellbeing and trauma support dog. So what we do is we can go anywhere really, but we go to police services where there's been trauma, and we allow Holly to do her stuff. So she comes in. It's what we call time for pause for pause.
Pause.
Yeah, pause for pause, where you pause to play with the paws. So you get some time with Holly, and it breaks down boundaries and just allows people to relax and allows people to have that conversation. And because of my history with my PTSD, it allows me to have that conversation and approach difficult conversations with other serving officers as well.
How much are you comfortable about talking about how it got to the point where you are suffering with PTSD?
Yeah, no, I'm quite open about it now. This is now my life. I talk a lot about my PTSD, and we do a lot at the Flint House Police Rehabilitation Centre, where officers go when they've been broken, either physically or they need some wellbeing as well. So we're funny enough, we're off down there this afternoon for a week to help with their wellbeing as well. So no, more than happy to talk about what I went through.
Please do.
It's basically my story goes back as far as 1998 on New Year's Eve, when I was on duty as a police officer with the British Transport Police at King's Cross. At 20 to midnight, we got a call to an officer assistance, and we went over there, and there was a big fight. There was a large man with a carving knife, sent to be a drug deal that had gone wrong. I got involved in the melee, got pushed to the floor, kicked in the head, knocked unconscious. And the last thing I can remember is waking up with a lot of fuss and nonsense and shouting and screaming and everything. So
I love the way you say fuss and nonsense. You had just been kicked in the head and were knocked out. Less of the nonsense, please.
No, if you could imagine one of those cartoon fights where there's a big cloud and lots of arms and legs sticking out of it, it was that's more the funny side of it. And the humour allows me to joke about it as well now. But moving on from that, I had 3 months off. The man was arrested and later sentenced. But then the next 4 years came along a lot of major incidents that I attended. The Paddington Ladbroke Grove train crash, Hatfield train crash, Potter's Bar and the train crash in Reading. And so I was on duty for all 4 of those, and we attended those. And they're quite defining moments when you go to something like that, and there's a train not the right way up, and there's a lot of carnage and destruction. And then it's when you're there, you turn into your super cop mode, and you get on with your job, and you do the training that you do, and that's what you do. We run to the danger while other people run away. But it's afterwards when you start to slow down, the adrenaline drops, and then you realise what you've seen, what you've done, and then that plays on your mind. And one of the things with PTSD is the inability to process the trauma. And I found out over a period of 20 years that I'd never processed the trauma from 1998. And then, of course, the train crashes and everything else just sat on top of that. And my brain was just unable to process the amount of trauma I'd gone through and seen. Until one day, that was it. And I went pop. My tin was full, as they say. Wasn't in a good place at all. Went to the doctor, went through all the testing procedures, and got diagnosed with PTSD. And I'm still recovering from that. But my recovery is ongoing. But I'm in a much better place. I'm still on the medication. But what I find now by working with Holly and doing the trauma support and attending police forces and attending places like the Police Rehabilitation Centre down in Goring, down in Berkshire. I also went there and had a period of a wellbeing support. They don't deal with PTSD there, but they do deal with things like my sleeping patterns weren't well. I just needed to talk to people, and I just needed to refocus my mind and try and process what was going on.
Just in terms of your personality or the way you lived life, how much did that improve after you were able to do that, able to talk?
Massively, and one of the things that I do now is I encourage people to talk. I'm 6'2". I'm a big built police officer, as you can imagine. I
can see you, but you're sitting down.
Oh, you can see me. I'll show you Holly. She's at the back on the chair.
Oh, she's beautiful. What is she, a golden retriever or a lab?
She's a golden lab.
Beautiful. Hey, there she's woken up. She's coming over.
There she is.
Anyway, you were describing yourself, which is always useful for radio.
Yeah. So 6'2", quite well built, typical roughy tufty, big bear police officer type thing. And I now promote the case that if I can stand up and put my hand up and say that I need help, then anybody can. I've done presentations where halfway through my presentations, my real life story, I've found out that that I've broken down in tears. And that also helps because it shows that it is okay not to be okay. But the main thing is encouraging people just to ask for that bit of help. Once you've asked for that help, it's amazing what's out there and what support you can get. And it just feels like the weight's lifted off your shoulder when you have that ability just to let go and let people and let your emotions and try and talk about what you've gone through.
You know, there's a reason I asked you to describe what it's like after you opened up, because I've had a text, and I'm going to read it out, Paul, and I'd be really keen just for your response. And there is a talk of suicide here, so I'm going to be very careful because I obviously don't want you don't have to give advice, but I just want you to react if that's okay. This is Rob, who's a serving officer. He doesn't want to give his details. He says, I'm embarrassed and shamed and guilty about everything. He says, good afternoon, Naga. Welfare provision for officers is woeful. We have far too many officers taking their own lives due to prolonged exposure to trauma. I've been diagnosed with PTSD and considered taking my life many times due to prolonged exposure to child abuse images. Never once was referred to specialist services and suffered horrific flashbacks for years before getting help. A good friend tried to end his life due to the same exposure and was sectioned and requires significant psychiatric care, which should have been provided to him due to his role and exposure to these images and videos. What would you say to Rob? Where can they, if there is an officer who, and he's serving, who feels they're not being offered the help, and you say as well, and you know this, Paul, big, roughy-tufty guy, not kind of, it's not the obvious thing to ask for. How do you go about this? What's the first step for someone like Rob?
The massive first step is really well done to Rob because he's put his hand up. He's sent that text, so he's actually made, and that's so essential that he's listened or he's found and he is asking for help. And one of the most difficult things to do is to ask for help. So So massive kudos for Rob for doing that. I also worked in a department of the images, so I know exactly what Rob's seen and what he's going through. It's a massive shame that he can't feel that he's getting the support, not getting the support from his force. I don't know what force he is, and we don't need to know that.
No,
but it is a generic thing. Well-being can be massively improved. So a couple of things straight away for Rob really is, well done. You've put your hand in the air. Massive well done for that. Find someone to talk to that you can talk to. A friend, doesn't have to be the closest person to you. You can talk to a doctor. I don't know what part in the country you're in, but if you do subscribe to a police rehabilitation centre, again, they won't deal with PTSD, but they can help you with mindfulness, reflection, and give you some skills in your toolbox to help out with. But the main thing is to start talking it through, or even go and see your GP. It is amazing now when you go and see your GP and say you're going through these things and you've been diagnosed with PTSD, how they will listen. I remember going to see my doctor, and she was an ex-army doctor, and you get your 10-minute appointments, and I was in there for 20 minutes. I said, I'm sorry, so I'm taking all the time. And she just turned around and said, it doesn't matter. You take as long as you want. And that was so defining for a doctor to be able to say, I know I've got a waiting list, but let's just take some time. So, I mean, I'm more than happy to talk to Rob. If you want to pass my details on to Rob, if you've got his details, and then he can give me a ring and I'll give him and we can have a chat. I can also have a chat with him about PTSD. One thing about PTSD is it's one of those things where they'll say you've got PTSD and off you go, but they generally don't explain it. And what I do is I break it down and make it so it makes a lot of sense to people.
let me bring in, it's really interesting that Rob, who texted in, and yes, regarding the details, Rob, if you're listening and you're happy, we will not obviously pass your details if you don't want them, but if you are happy, just get back in touch via text, and we'll put you in touch with Paul. Paul, stay with me. Paul's experience was, his PTSD began from a violent attack physically on him. We've heard from Rob there, who texted in, who is suffering because of what he has witnessed. Someone else who witnessed horrific scenes is Keith Malda, who's a PC and Police Federation rep in Brixton in South London. And in 2017, he was one of the first officers to arrive on the scene at the Westminster Bridge attacks. Then 2.5 months later, he was called to the Borough Market attacks. He was awarded a medal for bravery for his actions at both attacks. It's delightful to have you in here with me, Keith. Hello.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
We've made clear you're okay to talk about these incidents.
Yes.
You were one of the first to arrive at Westminster Bridge, and then this is after several people had been hit by a car. What did you witness?
Yeah, so my response team, we were the first on scene from Brixton. The bridges are split in half borough-wise, so we also had Westminster officers, and when I arrived, there were a couple of other police officers already on scene, but it was carnage. The phrase I always stands out is it was like a war zone, with bodies on the floor, with people panicking, people running and screaming. I remember thinking, it sounds silly, but this is kind of like a movie in those kind of scenes.
Something you just would never imagine seeing in real life.
Yes.
And I will just go over what exactly happened. It was the 22nd of March 2017. The car was driven at pedestrians on the bridge. The car then crashed into railings outside the Palace of Westminster. Khalid Masood, who was armed with a knife, left his car, ran towards Parliament. He was confronted by police. PC Keith Palmer, who was wearing a protective vest, wasn't armed, was stabbed and killed. Masood was then shot dead by armed officers. PC Palmer, 4 pedestrians also were killed in total. You had been ordered not to go onto that bridge, hadn't you?
Essentially, so for good reason,
yes.
Because you don't want to get in the way of any firearms officers that might be there to deal with it. You are also an attractive target for terrorists, wearing a luminous yellow jacket. But I think individually, officers make their own decision. Like anything in life, you risk assess and you think, well, there's people that need help.
Which is what you did.
Yes, yeah, not just me. A lot of my colleagues and a lot of members of the public were They were magnificent, helping me out with first aid. It was, I always say, in one moment, I saw the worst of humanity and the best of humanity all at the same time, just through everyone that was there trying to just help people afterwards.
10 weeks later, there was another incident, this time at Borough Market.
Yes. Yes, Borough Market. Our team had just started a night shift, and I remember hearing a call and thinking, here we go again. But in a weird way, I think it always sounds strange when I say it out loud. I'm glad that I was at both of the attacks, and especially the second one. I think that a lot of us on our team that had been at the first one, who also went to the second one, we kind of brought that experience in with us. So we were able to take, well, look, we've learnt this from Westminster.
Panic and the shock of what happened at Westminster and how you process that.
Yes.
You must have known. Well, I say this, I don't know if you would have known. Were you aware that this would have had an effect on you? Psychologically, emotionally?
Yes, I think so, because part of my role at that time, although I was predominantly a response officer, I was also a federation rep with the Police Federation. So I'd already referred a lot of officers to places like Flint House, the charity, who had experienced lots of trauma, such as Paul had spoken about. So, yeah, I think that it's something that all police officers are aware of. You know, I think they say the average member of the public will experience 4 traumatic incidents in their lifetime, and an average frontline police officer will experience something like 400. So I'm not unique in that perspective. So, yeah, I think that... I think I knew that, you know, it would. I mean, how can it not affect you if you've got empathy and compassion? You're not going to leave it and go.
How did it affect you?
Well, I think that I should say I'm very lucky. I've somehow I've got through both of them. I don't have PTSD. I don't. You know, I've managed to process that trauma in a healthy way,
And do you think by doing that early, by saying I'm going to actively do this early, that would have helped?
100%. I think there's probably 2 major things. I think the first reason that I think that I've got through it okay was it's similar to, like Paul said, you know, big roughy tufty.
I think those were my words, but I can say yes, you are roughy tufty. It's the technical term. Very pleasant roughy tufty, but yes.
Thank you. You know, a typical bloke thing would be, mustn't discuss emotion, but I'm not like that. I'm happy to talk, and I was very lucky that having been at the attacks with lots of my colleagues who were also at the attacks, there were those of us who felt able to, and I think that talking helped. But what really helped me was Flint House, a charity, one of the police rehabilitation centres. They're wonderful.
And that's funded by police officers, isn't it?
It's funded by, yes, it is funded by police officers and also donations. And actually, if it'd be, I'd really like to say a big thank you to everyone who does donate to Flint House. And if there's people out there who are thinking of putting their money to a good cause, Flint House are incredible. They helped me process it. They helped others process other things. And I think that, so I went to Flint House because I was convinced I was going to get PTSD and waiting for my thoughts to give me some counselling was a long wait. And just being on that residential programme with other police officers from around the country, sharing experiences, I think that really helped me process everything. So I'll forever be grateful to Flint House and everyone who donates to Flint House.
You were awarded the Bronze Medal with second award, clasp and police medal as well for your bravery during those terror attacks. The Royal Humane Society, when awarding you that, said, the society is in enormous awe of what you've done. You should be congratulated. We want everybody to understand that you're the good guys. It's really interesting that you said you saw both sides of humanity in both those incidents. It must be good to know that people do think the police are the good guys, because so often the reputation, and be it on telly, whatever, is that you're not.
Of course. And actually, I like the fact that with the Royal Humane Society said the good guys, because every time I always say that with those medals, although I'm so grateful for them, I've accepted on behalf of all of my colleagues who, I don't think that I'm not special. I've got those medals on behalf of everyone who done something.
Who all did something special, though. I'll say that, if you're not comfortable enough about saying it.
Thank you. And you're right, we are the enemy to a lot of people. I think that's a fact, and that's fair. But it is, I think after... when there's positive policing stories and you can see the good that the police do, it is nice to... I don't think you do it for the thanks. Naively, when I joined, I thought that I'd be on foot patrol, getting thanked by everyone left, right and centre. I learnt within about a day that that's not the case.
Okay.
But it is nice to receive thanks and people being grateful. Do
you think, and I'll ask this to Paul as well, do you think... even though it's still difficult, and, I read that text out from Rob, who's a serving officer. Paul, do you think that people are getting better, that police officers are getting better at speaking up?
It's getting better, but I think it's down to the other outside things that are going on, that people now, it's more acceptable to talk. It's more acceptable to have a mental health issue. There's mental health is taught in schools and things like that. So it is more acceptable to say that you've got a mental health condition and things like that. There is a lot more to do in the police service to turn the tide, to make it acceptable. And what I was saying earlier on, what is so essential that when officers are going to these traumatic incidents, it's having the ability to debrief afterwards. And sometimes that is what's lacking, that when you get the adrenaline drop and you go home, or you're going home alone, you're going home to a dark bedroom, and then you start getting intrusive thoughts because you've not had time to have a hot debrief. That's something that I get involved in with Holly. We do hot debriefing and things like that. So...
hot debrief?
Hot debrief. So say you go to a traumatic incident, then you'd all go back to the police station.
Right, okay. So straight away, while the heat's while the adrenaline's still pumping and it's fresh in everyone's minds.
Absolutely. It's when the adrenaline starts to drop off and you've not got anybody to talk to, that's when things start to go wrong. And that's when it's so essential to have somebody you can reach out to.
Right. Keith, do you think people are getting better? I mean, you say you're someone who's quite happy to talk openly and you've had colleagues around you who do that, but not everyone's like that, and that's okay until it's not okay.
Yeah, I think it's changed since I've been in about 20 years. It has changed. We're not there. There are still... I think there's always going to be people that are nervous to come forward. I think that sometimes it can be wrongly perceived as a sign of weakness and, I'm broken and, oh, God, are they going to sack me because I now can't go out on patrol for a while? Or if I say that I'm a bit crazy, does that mean I can't transfer to firearms? And, so there's a lot of organisational reasons that make people be
reluctant.
Yes. The Federation, we try and help with that. I would encourage, I think it was Rob.
Yeah.
Reach out to your Fed rep, my friend. Look on the Federation's website. We've got a charities page, and there's a lot of charities. In Flint House is on there, but there are other charities that can assist with counselling for on-the-job PTSD, etc.
It's been really good talking to you both, and I think, it may not just be Rob that's been listening to both of you with your experiences. I think you've helped again. Keith Malda, thank you so much, PC and Police Federation rep, for joining me in this studio. And Paul, it's been lovely talking to you down the line. And gorgeous Holly, I'm sorry, she will always upstage you. Even Keith knew. Yes. Holly was there. Yes. Oh, look, now I'm going to describe. She's walking over. She's got off the sofa. She's walking over, and I think she's having a cuddle. Is she, Paul?
She was having a snack, but now she's having a cuddle.
Yeah, she's a lovely girl. Paul Rowe, thank you so much as well. Retired police officer, trauma dog support, Holly as well.